What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video, I just wanted to talk about how it has never been easier to get into soloing content in Destiny 2 than it is right now. This is for a number of reasons that I will get into throughout the video, but a big reason why I suggest pushing yourself right now to try to solo some stuff is because of the artifact mods. This season's artifact is perfect for solo players thanks to the mod Solo Operative, which gives you a flat 15% buff to all your damage. That's all abilities, weapons, supers, whatever. It's all enhanced. And on top of this, we also have Revitalizing Blast this season, which allows solar abilities to debuff champions and bosses. This means that if you're running a solar subclass, you can have a 25% damage boost from Radiant, a 15% weaken debuff from Revitalizing Blast, and 15% more damage from Solo Operative. All of these combined allow your weapons to hit for 65% more damage. And that is before we add on things like boss spec or weapon damage perks like bait and switch. And speaking of Radiant, if you didn't want to run a solar subclass, you can still get Radiant extremely easily this season thanks to Flint Striker. All you have to do is hit some crits with a solar weapon and you get a free 25% weapon damage bonus on any subclass. So why am I talking about this? Well, I soloed every single dungeon this season on every character. That is 8 dungeons, 3 runs each. Plus, I then picked the character I liked the most for a certain dungeon and did a solo flawless run. So technically 4 runs each. Now, back in the day, I used to do a solo flawless of every dungeon every season because it was fun to use different strats thanks to the artifact mods. But I stopped doing this recently just because we have so many dungeons now and I didn't have the time. But because this season is extremely long, I figured I would do all the dungeons again and make updated 2024 guides on all of them. The videos are all up on my channel if you need some help soloing whatever dungeon you want to run. And you have till June to use the strats that I employed because the season goes until then. So it's a great time to give it a go. This means you can take full advantage of the absolutely broken artifact this season. The last time Solo Operative was a mod was right before Lightfall. And back then, you had to run Solo Operative on your class item. So it took up more armor energy. But now, artifact mods are on in the background so they don't mess up your build. This is just one example of power creep that has made it easier than ever to solo dungeons. Another big factor in why it is so much easier is because of the preset loadouts Bungie introduced in Lightfall. These are amazing as you can quickly swap from a survivability loadout to a damage loadout. You can hold armor charges and then swap to surges for damage. This used to be much harder to do. Before, you would have to swap around certain armor pieces and leave ads up and get a kill right before damage to make an elemental well or get charged with light. But now you can get 3 weapon surges pretty much on demand, and you can also quickly swap to something like Pyrogel Gauntlets for a quick one-off super. This is a game changer for maximizing the effectiveness of all your damage phases. I have a video that I made showing how to do this if you need more info. Sure, Restoration was hit with a nerf, but it's still extremely powerful, especially in new dungeons like Ghost of the Deep and Warlord's Ruin. For this reason, I strongly suggest running a solar subclass. And I talked about how much extra damage you can do with the artifact mods. 65% is a lot of extra damage. I'm sure we will have other broken artifact mods in the future, but I can't see many being this good. Not for solo players. I honestly worry a bit about the balancing of Warlord's Ruin after this season. The bosses will feel like a slog, especially the final boss. But then again, I have thought this before, and Bungie does a pretty good job giving us powerful artifact mods so it doesn't ever feel too bad. But that being said, Solo Operative is the undisputed GOAT for doing solo flawless dungeons. It literally knocks off at least one damage phase on basically every dungeon boss. I was able to 1-phase the Prophecy dungeon boss, which usually is pretty difficult, and I almost 3-phased the final boss at Ghost of the Deep, and only missed it because of my own mistakes. A 3-phase is great on that boss, and it takes time to get to damage, so the less damage phases, the better. I also 3-phased the second boss of the Warlord's Ruin dungeon on every character. I guarantee in the future this will be a 4-phase at least for most players out there. So that brings me to my next point, how to get started soloing stuff. If you've never soloed content in Destiny, it can seem daunting at first, but again, it has truly never been easier. The power creep in Destiny is real, and like I said, with how strong Solar is this season, especially solo, there has never been a better time. I would start with some older dungeons first to just get used to how to solo content, and then work your way up. Solo lost sectors are also easier than ever before, so try running those too to learn enemy AI and stuff, and use a build that you're comfortable with. I have a whole bunch of build videos on my channel, plus the dungeon guides and lost sector playthroughs, so if you need a hand, check those out. But again, use what you are comfortable with. Personally, I love Bonk Titan with Throwing Hammer and Syntheseps, and I just did a build video breakdown on this. It is still my go-to for most tough solo dungeons. I used it for my solo flawless Ghost of the Deep run because it is just so damn reliable. I also used it on Duality and Warlord's Ruin. Those three are the toughest solo dungeons in my opinion, but Bonk Titan is just so great for staying alive. You always have a Throwing Hammer, so proccing or Vitalizing Blast is super easy and consistent. Plus the hammer cures you. It's just an awesome build, and despite the slight nerf to Throwing Hammer and the nerf to Syntheseps, it is still a monster and can one-shot high health targets. And just remember that we all start somewhere. My first solo dungeon was Shattered Throne back when it came out, and that took me hours and hours to beat. But you know what? After I finally beat it solo, I learned a lot about how the boss fights work. And then shortly after, I solo flawlessed it. I actually solo flawless Pit of Heresy first, and that was a very tough challenge for me. But I was so hyped after that that's when I went back and I solo flawless Shattered Throne. And it was much easier the next time around after I had soloed it once before. Both took me numerous attempts in refining of strategies and making the right builds for survivability as well as dealing damage. And when I overcame the dungeon and beat it, it was such a great feeling. And that's another thing I want to point out. You don't have to go for solo flawless right away. In fact, I recommend just soloing it first. You will get very familiar with the encounters, and then when you do go to attempt the solo flawless, it will feel much easier because you have that experience. Again, power creep has made these far easier than they were in the past, but your first solo dungeon is still something to be very proud of, because you did it all on your own. And it will 100% make you a better player at Destiny. All the ads are aggroed onto you, and only you are around to deal with them. There are no other players to kill enemies for you, and no players to take the enemy fire off of you. Just you and them. So yeah, it will teach you how to manage that. And you will learn the mechanics of the dungeons better than you did before, because again, it's all on you. And by pushing yourself, that is how you get better. Again, we all start somewhere. I did my first solo dungeon and I was hooked. I then went on to solo all the exotic missions Destiny has ever made, and all the dungeons. And then I got into soloing GMs. But back in the day, I remember soloing a Master Nightfall for the first time and just feeling on top of the world. So you could also give solo Nightfalls a try if you wanted, because it truly is by far the best season to get into soloing content. We still have over a 2-month lull right now until the final shape, so if you're still loving Destiny, then there's a lot of time to try and get better before we take on the Witness, and you can also earn some nice emblems for doing so. Anyways, that's it. I just kind of wanted to make this video to encourage other players to give soloing content a try. I know I have grown to love it, and it has made me a better player. I now run GMs and fire teams with Fireteam Finder teammates, and I'm shocked at how easy they feel when you have other players. Same with running dungeons in a fire team, and I know you can get to that point too. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching. Good luck soloing whatever content it is that you want to solo. You got this. Take care.